Stepping into your wheelhouse for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
I have no proof because I wasn't there at the time, but I would imagine that the original death of Superman was a massive deal.
No.
No?
No.
No?
No.
Explain.
I mean, it defined big deal in terms of narrative. No,
Oh
not
no,
really.
not big deal in terms of narrative, but in terms of,
In
as
terms of
far as I
narrative and fan
understand,
reaction, I
like
would
it.
say not really. In
No.
terms of money and marketing, hell yeah. But that's why. It's because everyone immediately saw it as this big capitalist, cash grab. Everyone just went, oh, fuck this. Because it didn't have the emotional resonance as, say, something like Jason Todd dying. That was a big deal for a lot of people. He may not have been a liked character, but they certainly didn't expect that to happen to him because it was a Robin, It didn't have the emotional resonance as Dick Grayson, even before then, telling Batman to basically go fuck himself, he's going to become his own superhero. That was a big moment, because that was like, oh, I didn't expect a Robin to react like that to Batman.
See, this is really interesting to me, because I understand where you're coming from in terms of what the stipulations in the contract are for Robin specifically, and that's why those things are shocking.
Yeah.
Because there's an expectation as to what the Robin role is going to be like, and those were deliberate subversions of it. But what you're saying to me is essentially that those stipulations in the contract did not exist for Superman, even before the concept of superheroes being able to die existed.
Well, he wasn't the first superhero to die, let's make
Was
this
he not?
clear. Superheroes have died, but the death of Superman happened in the 90s.
In the
Now,
90s?
Yeah, if you want to talk about Jean Grey dying as Phoenix, that was shocking to people. And then she came back to life, and then she died
Well, yes,
again.
obviously. I mean, like the second part of the stipulation would have been that, of course,
Yeah.
now it is a joke that no superhero can stay dead.
Yeah, by then we'd gotten used to superheroes dying and coming back to life. Like, it was shocking to a point of, oh, they're doing it to Superman? Okay, well, I guess he'll be back in a few months. And we were right. Recently Wolverine died. And we were like, oh, okay. And Marvel did this thing, and they absolutely drug it out over months and months and months, and we were like, just kill him already so you can bring him back after the next big event. And guess what they've done after this next big event? They've brought him back to life. One of the funniest ones was Johnny Storm dying. He died about last year, I think. And not even 2 months later, he was back to life. And not even like an event comic. It was just like, oh yeah, I'm back now. That's how blasé death in superhero comics is for iconic characters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will tell you actually a shocking death that did happen. It was Supergirl. I think at the end of Infinite Crisis. That was a big one. That did actually shock people. It's actually a really iconic cover. It's Superman kind of holding, is it Linda or Kara? I can't remember which Supergirl it is. But holding her and, in that kind of like typical sort of Lapierre
Oh, I've
pose.
seen the cover you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and he's crying, he's screaming to the sky, and he's crying over his dead cousin. That was shocking for people because, one, her death meant something. It wasn't like this bland-ass kind of, shock kill that they do a lot in event comics where they kill off like a kind of class, like a level 3 class, tier 3 sort of superhero who have like a dedicated fandom and they just kill them off because like whatever. Like, some deaths are shocking because we don't expect it to happen in that particular series. Like, when Ted Kord died in Justice League International, no one was expecting that because, one, it came from a character who, while we didn't trust, we'd always thought was on our side, and then suddenly he turns around. Max Lord was his name, I think. Now, what's interesting about Max Lord, Wonder Woman killed him. Again, something else that was really shocking because Wonder Woman normally doesn't kill people. But it did make sense for Wonder Woman, I would argue, that, she's willing to kill someone if it gets the job done, She doesn't like doing it. She will try and reform and arrest, but if she can't stop someone, she will kill them. That's personally my take on Wonder Woman. And she killed Maxi Lord, and people were like, wow, that was a really shocking arc, because you killed one of the most optimistic, loving characters in Justice League International, and Justice League International was quite an optimistic series. It was about, superheroes and hijinks and time travel and wacky fun, and then Ted Kord dies, and it was really shocking because he was very much the heart of that series. And it's also why Supergirl dying was shocking, because she was an optimistic, good character, and she died to save everyone. Supergirl died for your sins, basically. But it's one of those things, like, by the time Superman died, it didn't matter.
I've done two things from this. First of all, the story that I have been told about the writing process and cultural context by and around the release of the death of Superman is complete bullshit. But that in the most conceptual sense that I was right, that when the concept was first introduced, when they were first allowed to transgress against the contract, that was a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about Robins earlier. When Damian Wayne died, no one was surprised, and people kind of reacted with disgust, really. Like, really, DC, you're killing off a 10-year-old boy, because they've kind of, they've subverted the trope too much, and they were like, really, you're going to kill off Damian Wayne? How is that in any way an appropriate end for his, character arc, And yeah, okay, he died a hero, and that's all fine and well, but people were annoyed because they were like, this isn't shocking anymore, DC. You've shown us, when they killed off Leanne Harper for basically shock, they showed us that they were perfectly willing to kill off a small child for shock and horror. And also, make her dad an amputee. God, Roy Harper's been through the ringer. Anyway, not that there's anything wrong with being an amputee, but it was still Cry for Justice was
bullshit.
Yeah, okay. Cry for Justice is a really bullshit, shitty comic. Watch Linkara's review to explain why it's bullshit and shitty, okay? Anyway, I need to take a deep breath. So, because they've broken the contract too many times, we know now that when they do this, it's because they want sales to go up. It's because they want money.
But this is the thing, though. They've broken the contract so many times, superficially, but honestly, they can't.
Yeah,
and the reason for that is because they're trying to, they are trying as writers to exert a very, very cynical force over an inherently idealistic medium. Which is why these characters will keep coming back.
Absolutely.
That's the point. It's like, well, okay, yes, part of the reason why they will keep coming back is because as long as the characters are popular, they will keep selling comics, and that's good because it makes money, but also because you can't have... If there's a horrible death, that horrible death has to have some meaning.
Yeah.
But the aversion of the horrible death also had meaning, which was why it worked for so long. So those characters will keep coming back because there is this sense that everything should have the capacity to be fundamentally good.
Yeah.
This made a lot more sense when it was in my head, but that's what superheroes are. And I think it's honestly the reason why this was a bullshit problem in Doctor Who as well. It's like, how many people have died permanently in Doctor Who? I mean, probably actually quite a lot, especially if you take the whole of Classic Who, but...
Yeah.
You remember the first time Rory died?
Yeah.
And actually people were not really upset, but we were all like, oh.
We were all like, oh, fuck, yeah.
Well,
shit.
That's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we'd already got into the point where Stephen Moffat was not writing very good Doctor Who, but okay, Rory died, and it was kind of weird, and we didn't really understand it, but the point was he was gone, and that was going to change Amy as a character.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. This most recent... I have not actually seen the new series of Doctor Who. I don't know if I'm ever going to watch the new series of Doctor Who. I imagine I probably will, but probably not soon. So if what I'm about to say is refuted either by the episode of Doctor Who that came out before we recorded this, or the one that will probably have come out before I post it online, I'm sorry. I think Danny Pink is going to stay dead.
I think he will too.
And honestly, that surprised me.
Yeah.
I thought at the point when he appeared, that final scene where they take his mask off?
Yeah.
That was honestly the only part of that episode that I thought was even, interesting. Just because it hit me in the gut and I was like, Danny Pink is going to stay dead.
Yeah.
This character, who did not honestly deserve to die, let's be real.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I probably give, Danny Pink a lot more credit as a character than his writers do.
Yeah.
Because I like Danny and I wanted him to be happy.
Yeah.
But evidently they had a different plan for him.
Yeah.
To be this sort of weird bullshit, basically, angst rock for Clara.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've watched the newest series of Doctor, the episode that's just gone is Magician's Apprentice. So the next one that's come out will probably have brought but in the Magician's Apprentice, Missy and Clara got killed by the Daleks, and I went, they'll be back next episode then. I completely didn't have any reaction to it whatsoever. I was like, oh, they're dead, never mind, I'm sure they'll be back next episode. Because death in New Who has no meaning. Death in Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who has fucking no meaning whatsoever.
Admittedly, like, although it was a little bit edgier, death in Russell T Davies' Doctor Who still was, like, it was up in the air.
Yeah, but I think the difference with Russell T Davies' Doctor Who is it was idealistic. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it was.
There was an inherent idealism to it, whereas Stephen Moffat pretends to write a cynical, dark series, and it's not Stephen Moffat.
It's not, and possibly, before we get onto the subject of how horrible a person Stephen Moffat is, it is possible that because he had this reputation during Russell T Davies' run as showrunner as being like the very shocking, scary episode writer who was able to take liberties with characters that perhaps other writers would not have been able to, that maybe he felt when he took over, well, I have to keep that, so I'm going to write more cynical Who where people can die, but honestly, when you see him talk in interviews and manage to avoid punching your television, you can see that he is at heart a very idealistic person. His idealism is bullshit, let me be quite clear about that.
Yeah.
The actual sources for why he is idealistic are utter bollocks, but he is a very idealistic person because he's got this idea in his head of what it's like to be a kid, and he wants to create media for that.
Yeah, doesn't do a very good job, but
he doesn't,
exactly.
But
no.
That's definitely what his motivation as a writer is. So he's not going to have a fun time trying to be cynical and gritty when that's just evidently not who he is.
Yeah, I think in a way I've always compared Stephen Moffat to Brian Michael Bendis a bit.
I don't know who Brian Michael Bendis is, and possibly listeners will not either, so maybe you want to start with that?
He's a comic book writer. He's quite a famous comic book writer. He's probably one of the most prominent ones that Marvel currently has working for them. For those of you who want to know what he wrote AKA Jessica Jones, which is going to be adapted into a Netflix series. He made Spider-Woman the character she is today. He's not writing the current Spider-Woman series. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And he wrote Ultimate Spider-Man as well, the Miles Morales stuff. So, but he's not a writer who is given a lot of credit because he's very good at writing certain things. Like, he was really good when he was writing AKA Jessica Jones. That's one of his, people consider that his best comic. I talked about how he made Spider-Woman the character she is today because he was very good at writing her. He was very good at writing Ultimate Spider-Man. But then you bring him onto the wider X-Men books, and he's not that good. He doesn't write a very good all-new X-Men. He doesn't write very good event comics when he's, made as lead writer on them. Because, he wrote some very good comics on his own once, and then obviously they got really famous, so they were like, let's put you on bigger projects then. And I don't think he can handle the bigger projects. And I think that it's like that with Stephen Moffat.
To this man who I have just heard of, I would kind of imagine in theory that writing the X-Men is probably quite difficult unless you have written nothing but the X-Men. Because there's so many of them, and they are all, in theory, separate characters with separate, character voices and character motivations and separate personalities. So it's unless... That's why I said ostensibly.
Yeah.
Evidently, if you get a good writer on them who does want to do that with them, they probably can be, right?
Yeah.
So if you're brought onto that from some external sense, even if you are able to do that much character range, you're probably not going to get it instantly.
Yeah.
It just seems a very difficult project to take on.
It is. I will admit that much. I think if I was the lead editor of X-Men books, I'd be like, okay, we have 3 main X-Men books, and then no more than that. We can maybe have a couple every now and then, and solo titles are fine. But 3 main Team X-Men books, and one of them is the teenage X-Men book, one of them is the main kind of big team that you have, and then one of them is a slightly more quirky team. Because it's, I think at the minute there are something 4 or 5, might be 5, close to 5 or 6 actually, main X-Men books at this count, that aren't solo titles. That all kind of have to share this universe and all these characters, and I'm like, you can't do it, I think I'm currently rereading X Factor, and there's Uncanny X-Men in the same universe going on. There's the stories of Uncanny X-Men, New X-Men, later on Generation Hope joins in, New Mutants, X Factor itself, X-Force, X-Men, an Astonishing X-Men.
You're just saying words now.
Yeah, that's 8 separate books. I'm sure I've probably missed some that started and ended on the run during X Factor. And some of them have their own tone, certainly. Astonishing X-Men was a bit more inclusive and had, characters like North Star on, and Karma, you know, had some of the more LGBT characters on. It was slightly better written. X Factor had a kind of noir detective agency thing going on. X-Force was about mercenaries and, you know, being a mutant working under the government and stuff like that. And you had X-Men, which was like typical mutant stuff. But then you have stuff like Uncanny X-Men, and it's like, what the fuck's that, really? What's Uncanny X-Men? It's nothing. It's just the other X-Men team, isn't it? That is characters you couldn't fit on the X-Men book, right? And like, I get like New Mutants and New X-Men. Why do you need, and Generation Hope? Why do you need 3 teenage teen books? You don't. You need 1. Really, you don't need that many books to appeal to a younger that many X-Men books to appeal to a younger audience.
Especially
I can understand
an audience with ostensibly limited buying power.
Yeah, like, you know, I loved Generation Hope. It was quite good. I really like New Mutants. New X-Men was alright. It had X-23 on it, and she's always awesome. She's the new Wolverine now. Alongside with old Wolverine.
It seems like every fucking time I hear about comics is about X-23 becoming Wolverine. It seems like that's a thing she does a lot.
Yeah.
It's not really like she can do anything else.
I mean,
like, as a character, she seems to be created just to become Wolverine.
Well, I mean, you know, on, like, Watsonian-wise, yeah. She was based...
yes, I know in the Watsonian sense she was created to become Wolverine, but also, like...
In the Doylist sense, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway, a very long time ago...
Yeah.
You were saying a thing about Stephen Moffat.
Yeah. I kind of feel like I was done saying the thing about Stephen Moffat, to be honest.
You were saying that, like, the if I'd stopped you, like, 2 minutes ago, I would have remembered all of the things you were saying.
Yeah.
But I think you were saying that there was something about Stephen Moffat's, like, the change in his wheelhouse that was, like, affecting him very badly.
Yeah, because he has to kind of suddenly write an entire series, and it's like writing an entire event comic, or it's like writing one of the really big comic books. It's much more different to writing a smaller character.
This is the thing, actually. I'm not sure why they made Stephen Moffat showrunner.
I know
he was, like, deputy writer or something at the
yeah.
time, but it's like, his actual input... Okay, Stephen Moffat's episodes in Russell T Davies' New Who were a mixed bag at best, and there's a lot of very good meta about why a lot of people remember them very fondly in comparison to his new work, and actually they had exactly the same problems. They were just meted out to us very small amounts, so we didn't notice them as much. As in, so Stephen Moffat was just as bad when he was writing in RTD Who. Okay, fine. His actual output per series was really very small.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
It was generally limited to an episode or two a series, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and Stephen Moffat episodes, like the one about Madame de Pompadour accepted, because weirdly that one wasn't really scary at all. Yeah. They had this reputation of being a lot darker and a lot scarier, a lot spookier than like normal episodes written by other writers, RTD especially. And that was kind of his niche.
Yeah.
And I think he recognised that he couldn't make the entire series like that, even though everybody kind of expected him to when he became showrunner. But he hasn't really done very well with doing anything else, because that was his thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously as well, it's really confusing to me, because I know that there were other people on the team who could have done it. And they probably would have done a better job. I mean, like, a lot of the people who Stephen Moffat has taken on as assistant writers have not honestly been very good. Like,
a lot of people
Neil
say
Gaiman's episode was fine.
A lot of people say Jamie Matheson. He was one of the new writers for the previous series, and his episode was really fucking good, actually.
Which one did he write?
Flatline.
What was that one about?
The one with
title, but not
the one with Clara taking over the Doctor role, and the TARDIS was small, and things on the wall were coming to life.
Oh, that one.
The only really good episode of that series. I didn't actually
really enjoy the conceit for that episode, but I thought the writing was really good.
Yeah, no, that was and a lot of people think he should definitely write Doctor Who, and I'm like, yeah, but he's only done a few episodes, so calm down,
it's like,
maybe.
You can't really get a measure of the guy yet, can you?
Yeah. You know, whereas I think Chris Chibnall would be a good... Because he's written quite a few episodes, and I'm like, he'd probably have been a really good showrunner. I'm not sure if he still writes episodes for it or not anymore,
Chris Chibnall, no. I mean, like, it's a toss-up between Chris Chibnall and Toby Whitehouse. Both of them would be better than Stephen Moffat, but both of them have massive problems with the episodes that they write, and it makes sense that they were chosen as writers by Moffat. I would prefer Toby Whitehouse.
Toby Whitehouse, because he does have recent. Well, not that Stephen Moffat's never run a series before. What am I on about? But where you have these kind of, you want to know someone has done a long-term project before over multiple series and is able to keep a consistent quality, which I know Toby Whitehouse has because he did Being Human. Although arguably last season, not that good. But
I mean, arguably Being Human itself is not that good. Although I think it kind of got away with not being all that good because it never really set itself up to be anything more than kind of pulpy. That was part of the contract. That was what you went in with the expectation of.
Yeah.
I actually really need to watch Being Human.
Yeah. The first season is really good. The second season's a bit darker, but it's really good. The third season, actually, I do remember being quite good as well.
I'm actually kind of sad I didn't watch Being Human when it first came out, because at that particular age I was really, really into that pulpy, kind of slightly edgy, but also having a lot more emotional depth than adults could really appreciate kind of shit.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was with that, when I watched it as well. The third series is pretty good, but the problem with the third series is that's when, especially, the problem with the fourth series is a lot of characters left after that. Toby Jones and Aidan Thingy-Majig weren't the two lead males anymore, so you just had the woman playing the ghost girl. But it did work, and I did like the fourth series. But then you had the fifth series, and it was a completely different cast, and a lot of it didn't hit a lot of the emotional notes because these weren't characters you knew, which is a problem that Misfits fell into as well, when they completely changed their entire cast in the course of a season as well. So,
and it's it will work better if it's a Grandfather's Axe cast, but people really liked the characters who then become the oldest characters.
Yeah.
If when they were introduced, people did actually like them and they thought it was fine.
Yeah.
If they didn't, then they're going to resent any new Grandfather's Axe cast.
Oh yeah, which again was the problem with Misfits. Even though the last series wasn't awful, it was kind of shit.
What the shit does any of this have to do with cynicism versus idealism?
Nothing, but...
Nothing at all.
Nothing.
There's going to be a whole fucking spin-off episode of the podcast that's just Beth talks shite about comics for 20 fucking minutes and then Alex gets her on to talking about Doctor Who and they bemoan Stephen Moffat as a showrunner and then some wank about Misfits, probably.
I mean, we did say when we set this episode out, this is going to be us complaining about shit we don't like.
To be honest, yeah.
Because, anyway...
Because I fucking hate, high-level cynic television.
Yeah, which,
Fucking, Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead, which I don't watch either of those television shows, but I hate the cultural impact that they have.
Yeah.
And fucking Season 2 of The Walking Dead game, which I already complained about in the End of the World episode, was shite compared
I agree
to
with you,
the first. Because, there we go. The Walking Dead game. First series was very idealistic, second series was very cynical, second series was shit. There we go.
And it's weird to say the first series of The Walking Dead game was idealistic, but it was.
It was. It was about a man who was going to great length to protect a child he had no real obligation to.
Yeah.
And it ends up dying for it, which is, that was an idealistic death.
Yeah.
Because there was a sense of nobility to it, and it actually had meaning because it came only at the end of a very, very long strain of staying alive.
Yeah.
And it was in service of something good. That was good. And season 2 was so shit by comparison.
Because it teaches you the exact opposite lesson you learn in season 1. I
mean, I do appreciate that it introduces Jane, who is a character who is the embodiment of the shitty thing that it's trying to tell you, just so that you can tell her to fuck off at the end, which I feel is also kind of symbolic. But no, season 2 was so bad. I feel like I've maybe talked about this on the podcast before, but this is my problem with science fiction as a whole. There's a huge amount of science fiction that is still taking cues from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I'm not going to knock Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Beth doesn't like it. I think it's an amazing book.
It's not that I hate it. I think it is a good story. I just can't get into the book. I don't like the way she writes.
But...
Continue.
Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in response to her perception of a very, very unhealthy pro-science community in terms of the society in which she was living. That there was... there's a lot of religious stuff that comes into there as well, but it's there are a whole load of themes throughout Frankenstein of unfettered scientific progress with no ethical or religious consideration being an inherent folly, being this sort of inability to admit risk. Like, that's the whole of what Frankenstein is about. Victor Frankenstein doesn't really think about what he's doing. He just wants, the knowledge and the progression of science and the glory that he will get. And he doesn't really pay attention either to the horrors of what he's creating or to his own limits as a character and his inability to care for this creature that he's created because he's repulsed by it. Actually, Victor Frankenstein is not a very relatable character. He's kind of a dick. But Mary Shelley wrote that because Victor Frankenstein, she felt, embodied quite a lot of both the scientists and the science fans of the time, or at least the attitudes among them toward science, and it was a cautionary tale. But that was the foundation of science fiction as a genre, so now, like, 100 years... When was fucking Frankenstein written? Because I'm going to get this wrong.
Hang on, it's within arm's reach for me. I can never get the page. God damn it. Published by Harding, Mayburn, Jones in 1818.
1818. Cool. So, 200 years later, you've still got science fiction working off these core themes of... Well, I say working... Not all science fiction. There's some very, very pro-science science fiction, but you've still got, like, this large chunk of science fiction working off this core theme of pushback against a very, very, very uncritically pro-science society that doesn't exist and hasn't existed for possibly as much as 100 years. Like, think about the way that people view science today. Either they don't understand it, or they do understand it, but they're still, like, concerned and suspicious of it. It's very, very difficult to get a strong pro-science sentiment floated on a modern society. At the very best, you're going to get, like, people who are happy to see results.
Yeah.
But science fiction, because it's founded in Frankenstein and in a couple of other similar works, is constantly, like, going through the motion, the muscle memory of pushing back against this horrible tide of completely uncritical glorification of science that has never existed. And it's the same for cynicism versus idealism.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Cynicism thrives off pushing back against an idealism that hasn't existed for 20 years. The issue here is the depth comes from the subversion of the contract. Series 1 of the Walking Dead game was really, really good because you go into a zombie apocalypse setting expecting it to be heavily cynical, so finding that it was heavily idealistic was good. Whereas, presumably, the first time, like, superhero comics or fucking Doctor Who or whatever subvert the idealistic direction by instead being cynical in a way that is still meaningful because it's relatable, that was probably also good. Because it's like, okay, this unattainable ideal is suddenly now relevant to my life. I mean, obviously, I am an idealist, so I find it harder to think of an example for that, but I'm sure it has happened. The problem with Dungeons & Dragons specifically is that nobody going in has any real idea of what the contract is supposed to be, because you all have different expectations, and it's sort of kind of sitting in the middle.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? Like, remember eons ago when I discussed Attack on Titan? I'm not going to go off topic, I promise. A lot of people really dislike Eren.
This is a lying weeboo.
A lot of people really dislike Eren because he's this idealistic idiot who, in 5 minutes of this kind of cynical setting, would get himself killed. But that already happened to him. Spoiler, he did die. He was like, we're going to kill all the Titans and we're going to save humanity. Chomp, dead. Right?
See,
and then
the very small amount of Attack on Titan I watched, I liked Eren.
Yeah.
Exactly because of that.
Yeah, and then he comes back and with, like, crazy ass Titan superpowers. And it is the fact, and it's because from a literary analysis point, Armin, Mika, and Eren all represent different assets of the human body. The idea that none can really live without the other. Mika is the body, Armin's the mind, Eren's the soul, he's the spirit. And you can't have, you can't just run on two, you need all three. You need to have your will to keep living, but you need to have hope, and you need to have your brain and your thinking. I goofed that terribly, but you get where I'm coming from. It's a trinity.
I get where you're coming from, but I'm not entirely sure where you're going. Like, what's the relevance of this?
It's the idea of, well, you see it when Eren dies in Attack on Titan, Armin, who represents the mind, the brain, completely shuts down. He can't function at all without his spirit, essentially. Without any hope, he can't work anymore. Mika goes on like a roaring rampage of revenge and is killing every Titan in sight until she collapses because she's so tired. Because she just represents the body and just the simple pure will to survive. Without hope, it's got nowhere to funnel itself into. It's got nothing to protect anymore. It's got nothing to save. She's just distilled down to her basic id. She has no super ego left without Eren. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah,
This is still ostensibly on topic, right?
Yeah. It's about explaining why Eren's important to Attack on Titan and why they need that idealistic element, because without it, the series doesn't work. You need to have this idealistic hero in this horrible, cynical world because it's needed, because Attack on Titan's main theme is humanity, essentially, and the continuation of it and hope for the future. In a post-apocalyptic scenario, if there is no hope for the future, if there is no hope for humanity, what is the point in humanity at all? What is our job?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which is the problem with most apocalyptic scenarios.
Yeah, it's like the fucking Walking Dead game. Like, okay, Jane is the distillation of the second season's attitude. That means that all of the survivors are going to be people like Jane. Fuck that.
Yeah, what is the point in a world
where everybody is like Jane? And, of course, none of those Janes are going to like each other because they'll all believe that, forming any kind of emotional connection with each other is going to slow them down. So it's basically going to be this world of slowly dying individualist people who hate each other.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a good world. That's not a world that I want to have a story told about. That's ostensibly what might actually happen, but I don't really think it's, that world isn't going anywhere. Spoilers, the zombie apocalypse in The Walking Dead is considerably less retrievable than some other zombie apocalypses, in that anybody who dies in any way whatsoever becomes a zombie, so long as their brain isn't destroyed.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sort of an ongoing problem past the point of like first infection or whatever. So everybody in The Walking Dead is going to die, and it's like, I kind of feel like the Jane event horizon is the point after which you want to stop telling stories about that universe.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
Sure, we all knew from the cynical worldview that these people were going to be the people to survive eventually, but that's it. Like, that's the apocalypse event.